All right, folks, you're very welcome to tonight's session in the player education series, which is going to focus on transitioning away from the field of play. So, this topic is something that's very important for all players. We all come to the end of our playing career at some time, some for very different reasons than others, some at very different stages than others. Um, but it's important that, I suppose as we start to transition or think about transitioning away from the field of play and potential avenues to stay involved in sport and the sport beyond participating. Just how we can do that and how we can start to develop those avenues elsewhere. So I'm very happy to be joined by Aoife. It feels weird to call her Aoife because I'm so used to calling her Mac. But Aoife is actually a former teammate of my own and has played for Donegal for many, many years, as well as excelling in other sports such as AFL or AWFL um, and basketball. But I know from experience, she probably try her hand to any sport that's going. But off the pitch, Aoife has experienced lots of success as well. And she currently works with the Australian Ballet as a performance coach, supporting dancers to develop their non-athletic identity and start to think of their life beyond their current careers and beyond, I suppose, the thing that's been their primary focus for many years, which I suppose is how it links to tonight's topic around how players can start to develop away from that playing career and potentially into other facets of the game. So, in terms of tonight's session, we are going to firstly look at stepping away from the game, and Eva's going to look at this, I suppose, phenomenon called Olympic blues, and then starting to look at areas such as personal expectations, athletic identity and crisis, and then beyond the athletic identity, actually a little bit of a potential existential crisis that can happen whenever we start to think of life beyond the playing field. And then equally, understand what are the benefits of non-athletic identity. And then I think at this point, I will start to come back in and look at potentially life beyond the pitch and how you can stay involved, particularly from an LGFA perspective, and really around keeping that connection. So um, I should say, as many people maybe have already heard, we're delighted to be joined by Aoife. We're particularly delighted because Aoife is currently as said on the last slide, in Australia. So she's caught up extremely early to join us here this evening. So Aoife, you are very, very welcome. And I pass over to you there now, if you're all right with that.
Yeah, thanks, Ailish. No problem. We can skip on maybe to the next slide on the Olympic blues. So yeah, as we were talking, or as you were saying there, Ailish, this is similar for any athlete who has committed their life to an intensive sports career. So no more than somebody going to the Olympics is somebody that's dedicated their life to playing Gaelic football. We're used to having this daily structure, and actually, the Olympic blues is this thing that happens to athletes, even if they've been really successful at the Olympics. And there's a really good documentary actually that I'd recommend on Simone Biles, where she's won gold medals and has come away and has felt depression after the Olympics after winning so many medals. But outside of that, then the Olympic blues can actually happen within the season. So when you think about, different times of the season that you've got all that structure, and then even Eilish, like from your end, can you even think about some of the times during a year that you might experience the Olympic blues?
Yeah, I suppose like I think from a Gaelic perspective, particularly, the aspect of championship, you never quite know when your season's gonna end. And I think that can be a big change, from a playing perspective, in terms of a season, because you're so used to having that structure, going training maybe Tuesday, Thursday, playing a game on Saturday, and then the result doesn't go your way one weekend, and then all of a sudden you've this free time on a Tuesday or a Thursday evening that you're really not used to having. And I think that can be quite a shift mentally, trying to cope with that in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of them. And then like, and I'm throwing things back at you here now from the very start, but it's evening with you, so I think it should be easier for you. But in terms of transitions, and we're talking about sorry, mostly retirement, but outside of that, you know, in the LGFA, are there other times that you might experience transitions either forced or unforced. And I think we had a bit of a chat about this when we caught up there recently.
Yeah, like I think like obviously things such as if you've experienced an injury, that's probably quite a big one.
Yeah.
Equally, as players, you don't have any control over management decisions. So, you can be maybe either tossed to the side or yeah, you can just not be selected, which then you've less control over that. But equally then there's other life stuff that goes on. So you might have to move away for a career, or things such as maybe pregnancy as well can affect that.
Yeah, so pretty much you've hit sorry, my December my December blues at the moment. I'm coming down with a bit of a cold. But yeah, you've pretty much hit all of them on the nail on the head there. So apart from those that you've mentioned, the other kind of massive transition that people would go through at times is step ups between different grades, especially like it's very clear in the LGFA and the JA how that actually works, where you're going through and you can often be a big fish in a small pond and you make a step up, whether that's between grades or it's your final step up to senior. And, that's another serious transition during an athlete's life and career. So all these transition points are really important you know, to be aware of, but also to have strategies then around them. And then going back to the Olympic blues. So when we have these periods of times where we don't have that structure anymore, where you're putting all your energy and all your passion into something, and then next thing it's gone. And I can speak to this, I have felt absolutely lost a few weeks after celebrating an All-Ireland final, for example. And most years it's not ended in winning an All-Ireland final. At the end of the day, you're very lucky if you get one. And if you get more than that, great. But outside of that, it often ends not the way that you had wanted it to end. And even, looking at then, you might have a week or two where it's actually nice to get a bit of a break, but what are you left with then? And then when we're looking at things like retirement, that's ongoing. That's not just, okay, in 3 months' time, we start back again. I'll have that structure back. I have the thing that I'm motivated to do, the thing I'm passionate about, and also all the good hormones, all the highs that we get from being in our sport. And that's not just from playing, that's the social aspect. And lots of different things come into play with that. So important to be aware of how you're feeling and what you're going through. And that means in the past, so we can learn from it, in the present, what's happening, and also looking forward to the future, which we'll look at in a few slides time. Because it's not all doom and gloom. I want to say that there was a lot of crisis thrown in there. And we're actually just looking at, okay, worst case scenario, this is what it can look like. And I really think it is important to acknowledge that, because I know we were joking, Eilish, earlier, the two people to be talking about this, and because we're both very aware of each other and our sporting careers. And for everybody else, just to give you a bit of a background, I'd say it would be safe to say that both myself and Eilish, for a long period of our lives and our football careers, our identity would have definitely been wrapped up in Gaelic football. So where I'm coming from, I'd be known as a footballer. Where Eilish is coming from, she's known as the footballer. And that was our own identity, but also, and we'll talk about it again, but an identity, put on us as well from other people, and expectations from other people as well. So we'll have a look at that in a few slides' time. So what we are looking at doing then, being aware of these things now and going forward, because it is such a big part of being an athlete, we want to look at focusing on prevention strategies and then subsequent intervention strategies if needed. Some people will be happy to walk away when they're done. Some people will call time early, and that's great. But for a lot of people, they will actually need a lot of support going through to the next chapter of their lives. And that might be practical support, but it also might be, psychological support, emotional support. It will vary from individual to individual. Um, have you anything to say on that slide, Eilish? I know I pulled you into it, but happy to move on to the expectations now. Um, so the expectations, we are forming our identities from when we're very young, and we're very susceptible. So especially with Gaelic football, I find, because one of the best things is in Gaelic football, you you play for where you're born into. It's very parochial. So it's a whole community thing, from your village, your town, your club to your county. And I've never, hand in my heart, played another sport where I've felt that has been my out and out identity as Gaelic football has been. Um, the lines can get blurred. So there's a, this is who I am versus this is what I do. So I know for a long time in my career, personally, I would have thought this is who I am. Very much did not separate the two. So those expectations are self-imposed as well. You know, that's that toughness. I'm tough, I'm strong, I push through things. And I feel like that's a very Irish identity, or so I've been told. Especially in Australia, even the AFLW girls, you know, it's something that a lot of the coaches would say, and people have worked with them. They say, oh, the Gaelic girls, you know, really, really tough, really strong, just, you know, there's no stopping them. And I do think that comes from our roots in Gaelic football. Uh, so looking at the tough times then that we go through, this is something that I've actually been researching recently. We have this, what they term inner arrogance, and that inner arrogance is very necessary to succeed in high performance. But it's also this thing where we say, right, we set our own goals and then we do whatever it takes to achieve those goals. So when it comes to going through tougher times, and that might be personal, it might be to do with performance. It can be really related to management. It can be related to how you're playing. It can injury, anything really, that's challenging. Naturally, we will try to get through it and push through it ourselves without asking for that support that we may need. And then we tend to bring that into life after sport. So those beliefs, those behaviors, those are what we take away from our sport, and they serve us so well. But there are times when we need extra support, then it actually prevents us from asking for it. So during these transition times, they're really hard. If we're injured, if we're dropped, if we're retiring, those are the times that it is actually really important to reach out for support. But just having that self-awareness and knowing that you don't have to figure it all out by yourself is a big step in that. And then the thing is the expectations of other people, like we've already touched on. So that's our family, our friends, our teammates, coaches, and even the public. You know, you are the footballer, you are your sport. And at the end of the day, that can be very easy to take on and then reinforce in our own heads. And I do feel like as well, and Eilish might have something to say on this, but in terms of retirement and transition on to something new, I mean, since probably like I was only halfway through my career, people automatically would say, oh, it's not long till you're going into coaching now. And first of all, I had no intention of stopping. And second of all, I actually knew, like, I used to be a bit confused about that, because I used to think to myself, yeah, maybe that is, you know, the next step, because actually, what am I going to do with all this time and energy and passion, and, you know, how do I stay in the sport? And I know Ailish is going to touch on this towards the end as well. You know, the different avenues out there. And yes, there's opportunities to stay in your sport, but you don't, first of all, necessarily have to wait until you're finishing your career and then figure it all out. You know, and I'll just use, say, Maggie Farley as an example of this. Maggie was playing away. She was upskilling herself with refereeing and doing courses, getting experience. And then she moved into that area and is doing brilliantly. But you don't always have to go with the expectations that other people put on you. And yeah, Eilish, have you anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think even particularly that last one around, the expectation that all of your time should be devoted to your sport. And I think it kind of links into that piece, Aoife, that you mentioned around this inner arrogance and, setting and like, I suppose, like we kind of talk around the ego. And I think ego sometimes uses the word where we think, oh, people are particularly big-headed, but actually, what it just means is that you're probably just going to look out for your goals and achieving those, and that's going to be to the forefront of your mind. And particularly, if you're playing at a higher level, that might be necessary at times to prioritize what your goals are in order to achieve them. But I definitely think, yeah, that when I was younger, I used to think, the more time that I could dedicate to football and focus on football, the better I was going to be. And then I think maybe, the older I got and the more experience I got, I actually realized it was good for me to diversify my interests in my life, and give me other aspects to focus on. Because then when I actually went on to the field, I was fully focused on that. But then I could kind of leave that to the back of my mind then till the next time, I go onto the field, which was nice and kind of helped me to deal with that and then supported me then, probably as I stepped away, particularly from county football.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this a little bit further in the next slides, but I do think that it's something that's championed too. Do you know, at home, I think the more full on you are, the more intense you are. It's one of those things, oh, she never leaves the pitch, or oh, he's always down shooting, or whatever the thing is. The fact that you dedicate everything to something, it really is championed kind of amongst your community of people, your county, whatever it might be. But yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about though that kind of balance and creating that non-athletic identity, because one of the things that I really want to get across in this webinar as well is the fact that it's not just for retirement. So if somebody had said to me while I was playing and I'm in that zone where, hard to see outside of like what you're focused on, um, if somebody had said to me, well, you know, this is going to help you in retirement, the last thing I want to think about was retiring. That's just something that I'm not even going to look at right now, because I don't even want to don't want it in the forefront of my mind or even the back of my mind. But the fact that it can actually benefit you as a player, and you've just touched on it, Ailish, we're going to look at it, but I think that's one of the big things, is that you can actually start creating and should be creating this non-athletic identity from a much younger age, not just when you're going to go into retirement. Better late than never, but it's something that you can be doing from a lot earlier in your athletic career. Happy to shoot through to the next one. Yeah, so as I said, we're using the word crisis a lot, but look at this is like worst case scenario, and it's something that does happen. So it's good to kind of, it's a bit of a spectrum, and some people are so happy to walk away from their sport, but other people are actually, really struggling from walking away with their sport. So we'll have a bit of a look at what that actually looks like and how to overcome it. So anything that we're bringing up, we're going to give some strategies and around how you can navigate it as well. So at the end of the day, once you step away from your sport and that thing that you've put all your identity into, there can be a loss of sense of self. So again, going back to who am I? What do I do now? What is my identity? It comes down to, as well, a lot of the times I've kind of just touched on, I find people are retiring on their own terms can often fare out better than people that are, retiring because they've picked up an injury or they've been deselected, and that's out of your control. So you've not actually decided. But that happens quite a lot. So it's good to talk about that too. We had a discussion as well when we caught up, Ailish, just about female athletes and, you know, the kind of identity crisis a female athlete may be going through, because I do find that, I don't know if it's just at home, but it goes back to expectations as well around, you know, oh, you're a female, this is what you should be doing. So, oh, you should be retiring now because it's time for you to have children, and, or else, oh, you're this age now, you should stop playing. And the same things would probably never be said to a male athlete. So that's something as well, that those expectations are put on female athletes. And did you have anything? I know we were chatting about Ailish, but would you have anything to add into that one?
Yeah, like we've actually done a bit of work on this recently, and we were looking at we had a group of players that were discussing this, and like they particularly talked around, it's not necessarily listed here, but I suppose the impact of like potential retirement on the wider family and the wider circle as well, and this thing of, oh well, my whole family, like it's,
Mm.
everybody would go to the games, and it's nearly a retirement for everybody then as such as well in some ways, which can be that can be another pressure as well to deal with. And I suppose, yeah, again, from the female athlete perspective, it's, as you say, for that kind of societal expectation, maybe of, all right, you're at a certain age now, maybe it's time to step away, from sport, and that there's other maybe priorities at home that should be looked after, or that should be prioritized in the first instance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then just to throw in like what the research has shown as well, but athletes proactively diminish their athletic identity and begin to draw on other sources of identity prior to retirement. And in doing so, they're reducing the risk of identity issues upon and following their retirement. So again, that's just looking at creating that non-athletic identity. But some people go out and they actively seek that out themselves, because they can see, like that was myself. I never talked about, I never knew there was a non-athletic identity when I was coming into finishing up playing football. But I was already looking out for opportunities and trying to figure out by myself. And, you know, then reaching out for support as well. There's great organizations out there, and just having a look at, how do I stay involved and what would replace the thing that I love, and the time and the energy and the structure, and how to stay involved in sport. And, you know, you make mistakes along the way as well. I know you said this is just a funny story, and it relates to ego, and I'll just throw it in there quickly because I tell so many people I work with. But it's so easy when you're having to replace something. And I needed a physical outlet as well, because it wasn't just, I love sports psychology, but it wasn't just going to be enough, because so much of my identity and so much of my day was wrapped up in being physical. And I love that. I love training. I love being active. But when I stopped playing football, a rowing club reached out to me, and they said, "Hey, you've all these great attributes, to be a rower. Why don't you move into that, move into it? We could have you go into the world championships." So my ego got completely hijacked. And next thing, I was on a rower, the stationary rower, and they were teaching me, and I was like, yeah, this is grand, can see what they mean. And then went out onto the lake and went to get into the rowing boat, and it was very unsteady. And I was like, oh, okay, can I have those stabilizer things that those young ones over there have? So they gave me the stabilizers on the rowing boat. And then after a few weeks, I was going up and down the lake, and it was going well. And then they wanted to take the stabilizers off, and I was like, no, 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 I can't fall into the water because I can't really swim. So then they said, you're going to go and have to learn how to swim and properly. And I just realized, I was like, oh, I actually don't care. Great sport, totally away from the way that I have always played sport. This like consistent rep, repetition. You're doing the same thing over and over again. Plus, I'm a really poor swimmer. But at the time, I was so happy to jump on anything that was going to give me that kind of structure, and, give me that outlet for being physical. And yeah, like a chance at maybe doing something really great in the sport. And I didn't even open my mind up to all the reasons why I shouldn't be doing that. But it just, for me personally, like I always tell people that story because I think it's something that you should really be considering and looking at it from all types of mindsets. And you can make a mistake and say, not for me, move away and find a thing that you want to do. But it is just one of those things that it's really good to start thinking about before you retire, and, setting those strategies really, and structures up, and having something maybe to move into. And I know you're going to touch on a lot of the different roles that you can do, but that's a story I just tell. I tell people all the time because it's a bit of a bit of a red flag story. So yeah, don't get hijacked, and consider everything, and yeah, and find something that really resonates with you and maybe fits into your own way of what you used to do. So I would never be in a structure in terms of Gaelic football. It just never suited me. But now I'm playing tennis and I'm like, yes, this is all over the place. Anything can happen. And it suits me down to the ground. So it's just one of those things, it's something to really actually give consideration to. But also, if you had a bit of support, and if I had actually talked to somebody about it, people straight away would have said to me, have you considered this? Because I don't think maybe that would suit you. So yeah, good to have conversations around these things. Now, this is probably worst case scenario of where we can go with this, but it is worthwhile just bringing it up because I think a lot of people don't consider people that are retiring and what they might actually be going through. So even if it's not for yourself, it's for other people, that maybe that are surrounding you too. And just that can be when you get injured. It can be like for female athletes, they might go away and have a baby, come back, or retirement, whatever the case may be. So it actually does come down to what is the purpose and meaning of life now? Because I've put everything into this. Sometimes as well, if things haven't worked out for an athlete the way that they thought it was going to work out, that athlete might be wondering if it was a mistake to put their whole sense of value and all their goals and their sense of self into one basket. And with our sport, I feel like that's what the majority of people do. The other thing is, yeah, what could take place then for that old guide for their motivation, determination, and self-discipline? Even in terms of like now I can speak out the other side, but I'm still always looking for that kind of challenge. So when I was playing football, it was very easy to know why you were trying to run a distance in a certain time or you were doing something. Whereas now sometimes you'd be doing something and it's extremely hard. And sometimes I question, I'm like, why am I even doing this? But it's from that kind of behavior and those beliefs and the way that you've been brought up. And you're always setting yourself challenges. But it's lovely then if you can set yourself challenges in a way that's actually going to serve you later on in your retirement. So finding those. What replaces the goal setting and sense of achievement? That's what you're going to talk about, I know towards the end, Eilish, as well. So, is that a different role? I've seen so many people moving into coaching, and I feel like especially in the GAA and the LGFA, we do not have enough female coaches. And, you know, I think it's just from lack of opportunity, really, historically. And now we do have these opportunities coming up, and people that are in those roles are very much fulfilled. And then you're going to talk about a range of other roles as well that you could move into. So not just outside of our sport, but within our sport as well. What could be worth devoting myself to again at this level of intensity? And I asked myself that question, definitely more than once, because I did wonder, was there anything worth devoting myself to at the intensity I would devote my sport to? And it doesn't have to be at the same intensity. I think that's a really important point. It will look different. You might never get anything that replaces, exactly what you experienced as a player, but that's okay. It can be something totally different. And that whole kind of like acceptance goes a long way as well. And moving into a new chapter, just knowing that it doesn't have to exactly replicate the old chapters. And then how will I ever reach the kind of excellence I have right now in anything else? So some people might have completely devoted 100% of their time to their sport, and then so if you haven't had an opportunity or you haven't devoted time to upskilling in a different area of your life, it is hard to know, like, if you'll ever be able to attain the success that you attained in your sport in another area. So when we're used to, striving and attaining and achieving our goals, even if it's not very often, like I said, we don't win championships in All Ireland's year after year, but you're still striving towards that and you've still got the skill set. So those kind of other pathways as well, in terms of maybe outside of sport, you know, upskilling in different areas, if it's college or uni or a trade or even a hobby, that's something that you have always wanted to do, but you haven't. Those are great areas then to focus your time and energy on.
I think just on that as well, you feel like, the aspect of goal setting versus maybe being more task orientated. as well can be quite useful for people maybe to in terms of dealing with that identity, because as you pointed to there, not well, actually most people or most teams, come the end of the season, uh, I'm sure like 99% of teams finish on a loss. It doesn't matter nearly how successful you are throughout the season, and that's just unfortunately the way that it is. But equally, like even if you aren't successful, necessarily from a championship perspective or whatever that might be, there are equally other parts of the sport that you might miss, in the sense of just meeting with your friends for training, that social connection. Um,
Yeah.
and so for some people, yeah, it might not be that level of intensity, but it might be, another type of connection that they have as well that might create that existential worry, let's say, as opposed to the word crisis.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, on reflection, because I work with quite a lot of dancers and say athletes, and one thing I do say to them is like, at the present, when you're there, it these things can seem like the most important thing. Like I definitely, and you can tell me if you've experienced the same, Eilish, but I've definitely, during my career as an athlete, thought there was times that an All Ireland was the most important thing. Like it was just winning an All Ireland or winning the championship. And it was a group mentality as well. Like I definitely have played in teams where this is the most important thing and we've got this goal and nothing else matters. Like we're just focused on this goal. And to be honest, like looking back now, I can definitely say that particular year, yeah, there was no balance. I put way too much into it. And then in terms of, the things that you do sacrifice, and it does take sacrifice, but, you know, there's maybe just a bit too much sacrifice. And when you kind of look back, the best things that you actually get out of your sport, I think, are the social connections. Like all the best times, it was because of the people, regardless if you were winning or you weren't winning. And even going forward, that's what you take away. Like medals will get dusty. It's lovely to have them, but they're away in a box somewhere. They'll be gathering dust. Whereas it's the people and those connections. And it's so important. Take sport away from it. Connection is just so important for human beings and for well-being. So I think that's like a really good point that it's not all about, goals and achieving success. A lot of the times the best things are actually surrounding that connection. That's, like you're going to talk about, a really important thing is to remain connected and to have opportunities to do so.
Perfect.
So now we're moving on to some happier slides. You'll be happy. So I touched on this and I said we're going to talk about it a bit more, but this idea of creating a non-athletic identity, it came out of research by the International Olympic Committee. And it's only recently, very recently, that they started doing research on athlete well-being, which at the end of the day, if an athlete isn't well, and if that's physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever it is, they're not going to be performing to their best. And they were looking at how it affects performance. So this kind of is twofold. It's how an athletic, non-athletic identity benefits not only retirement, but also your playing career. And as I said, if somebody had said to me, this will actually potentially improve your performance, I would have jumped on it. So athletes have the agency to a greater or lesser extent to choose their identities, to change and grow. So it's something that is very much within our control. We are not just who we're telling ourselves who we are, or other people are telling us who we are. We actually have that control and those choices to make in creating an identity for ourselves. And that might be more than one type of identity. So, identity work is defined as a process in which individuals form, repair, maintain, strengthen, or revise their self meaning. So, even that point alone, when you think how much of that we do as an athlete to create our athletic identity, it's applying that then to creating a non athletic identity. So, benefits of the non athletic identity on the sport and career. As I said, this if I was younger and I was still playing, this would have been the bit that would have gotten me. It's so important to start, forming this non-athletic identity from when you're really young. At the moment, I'm probably working with some dancers and they're very young, in their early 20s and have full careers ahead of them, but they're already creating this non-athletic identity because first of all, it takes the pressure off. You know, as athletes, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. A lot of other people put pressure on us. But at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, and I think, getting an injury is a great kind of micro example of retirement where something is out of your control. This has happened, but you know, what do I do then if that happens? And it's one of those like eyes open moments where it's like, well, everything, all my eggs are in one basket. But the people who have created a non-athletic identity or say non-dancing identity, they don't feel like they've lost everything because that's what even an injury can feel like that. It can feel like the whole world is falling apart. This has happened, and somehow the world has kept spinning, and people are still playing football, and matches are going on ahead without me. And like, not everybody is absolutely devastated because you have to get on with it. And I think that's a really good example of a time before you get to retirement because I'm pretty sure most people will pick up an injury that puts them out for, a certain amount of time. But yeah, so having that non-athletic identity, you're kind of taking away all that pressure and anxiety that performance anxiety that people put on themselves as well. That's what I would find when I'm working with, say, athletes or dancers. When you take away that, you know, everything is in one basket, then it attenuates that anxiety and that pressure. And it takes tension out of the body. It takes tension out of the mind. So you can perform with much more clarity. And those are the things I think as an athlete when I was younger and I was like really hyper focused in one direction, that would have got me if I thought, oh, by taking all of this, expectation, pressure, anxiety away, then I would actually perform much better. So that's one of the big things. That's one of the ways I see it working really well with athletes and dancers. And it's that perspective. Sometimes people go away and have a baby and come back in, and that's their perspective. But again, that's because they've maybe got a new identity formed very quickly as a new mother or a new dad or whatever it is. And you often hear, Ailish, you might back me up on that one, but I often hear dancers, especially or athletes, saying that, yeah, I went away and I had a baby and I came back and I'm actually doing so much better. I'm enjoying my sport or my, dancing so much more because I have a different perspective. Like this is not everything. So that's something I would see quite often. And I don't know, Eilish, if you would have any other experience of that.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that. Like, I think anything that's probably like a key change in somebody's life and their life perspective, whether it's it can be obviously a happy occasion such as that, or maybe like unfortunately in other times, it's, if somebody's lost somebody maybe in their life,
Yeah.
and that can be, it can bring, I think, wider life into perspective, and in terms of this kind of creating that non-athletic identity. I think that can be really, really important. As you say, it seems a bit like a paradox that actually if you focus less on your sport, it might benefit you more.
Yeah.
And it can be quite hard to trust that at times because, as you mentioned earlier, there's maybe a focus on let's just get as much quantity of everything as we can and throw as much stuff at it and hope that the more I do, the better I will be. Whereas actually, maybe it's just more quality, which will lead to better output.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, we can probably go on to the next slide there. Yeah, so there's activities around that as well. I mean, I normally work with people one to one, but you could definitely do some of the activities, in a group setting too. Probably something good to do as a team. Actually, it could be a good team exercise where you sit down and I'm happy to. I can't go through it right now, but there's some activities I'm happy to send through. I can send them to you, Eilish, or whatever the case may be. But some of the strategies then that we can look at are separating the person from performance. And separating your self-worth from what you can achieve, because often when we're of that mindset that it gets us so far as an athlete, but then we tie up our self-worth in our performance. So if we haven't performed well, for example, or we've been dropped, or whatever the case may be, then next thing you can feel bad about being a person. And that's something that I deal with athletes and, say, dancers. But it's trying to separate that, because it's not who you are, it's what you do. Those coping and well-being strategies. So having goals, things that you want to do in the next chapter, things, and that doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be high performance. It can be simple things that you want to do and you want to achieve, and things that are just going to make you happy. A lot of the time as well, it comes down to stress management and well-being. So, coping strategies around that. And that can be a range of coping strategies in terms of, you might work with somebody, or you're, doing your own thing in terms of like meditation, mindfulness, relaxation techniques, all of those types of things as well, that serve as well as athletes, but also in, creating that kind of non-athletic identity. So this is what you're going to touch on soon, Eilish: identify new areas of passion and interest, potentially staying in your own sport, but identifying and training towards new potential roles. So you can still be in your own sport, but you can also be looking at the opportunities out there to stay involved and have that connection that's so important, like we talked about. Developing skills and competencies through sport and external opportunities. So we're very fortunate that sport affords us lots of opportunities to develop, say, our leadership skills. I know of many people that said, "Oh, if even the Donegal team," I was told one time, if anybody asked me for a job on from the Donegal ladies team, I would give any single one of them a job without looking at the resume, because all of those characteristics and skills that you need, hardworking, dedicated, motivated, you get them through sport. But then also, what do I need to do? So, you know, identifying opportunities for yourself, if that's, training, um, university, whatever the case may be. And then identifying those transferable skills that you already have, and skill gaps for emerging areas of interest. So whatever it is you decide to do, have a good look at what you already have, and then identify those areas that you actually need to work on. And you can do that with somebody, or you can sit down, you can do that yourself. All good with that one, Ilish? And then these are just some examples of resources, and I'm sure we could actually just put resources together as well. But like, we're doing this webinar to talk about this. So you've got the LGFA that I'm sure if people were interested, Eilish, they could, can reach out to discuss opportunities. And I know you're going to be talking about them,
Absolutely.
but yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. The other thing is to get that support. I've talked about that, inner arrogance that we have, but there's a lot of support out there. And, sometimes it does take, working with somebody, if it's to get clarity, if it's for accountability, whatever the case may be, but, like a psychologist or sport or coach. And then there's simple things, like a lot of people actually like setting up a business potentially, and it might be something on the side, or it might be something they want to do after their sport. And then you've got all the LEOs, and there's a lot of resources out there as well, to help. Yeah, if you're just going new into business. The other thing is the further study, which we touched on. So identifying areas maybe that you need to get upskilled in, and then looking for opportunities for other roles then within your sport, which Eilish is going to talk about now.
That brilliantly led in it there, Aoife. I'll give you an opportunity to rest your throat for a second.
Yeah, I just would point out my throat is struggling today. I'm sorry if I've been
Yeah.
going in and out.
I think it's probably painful for anybody listening to the two of us, seeing as I'm all stuffed up and you have a sore throat. But the joys of December, guys. Just we're nearly towards the end of the webinar as well. So if anybody does have any questions, just feel free. I've seen one or two come in via the Q&A there already, so I'll pick those up now in the next 5 minutes. But if you do want to send in any questions, just write those in. So as Aoife has mentioned, there are loads of opportunities to stay involved within the sport. And I think, this topic around transitioning away from the field of play, and whether you want to call it retirement or it doesn't necessarily really matter what you call it. For me, it's around giving people opportunity to stay involved if they want to be involved. So, on a personal level, as Aoife kind of has already alluded to, there are aspects from a personal development perspective that are fully focused on, I suppose, developing the individual, and they're available at local and national level, and they focus on a whole different range of strands, whether that's around volunteering, administration, coaching, officiating, PR. So Learn to Lead is probably the national level program which is currently available. It's actually currently open actually for applications, I think, for next year, for the 2025-2026 version of that program. And then the Leading Provincial Females, this then happens across Gaelic Games, so across the Gaelic Games organisation, but runs on a provincial level. So they run through the 4 provinces, and they tend to run on a bit more of a familiar, or sorry, suppose frequent basis. But those programs are all revolved around developing the individual. I think Learn to Lead has around 20 to 30 people that go through that program for every iteration. And you can see loads of stuff about this on the website, but you can definitely see that anybody that goes through those programs or engages with those, they do get certain levels of qualification, maybe for example, but it definitely brings them a certain level of personal development that you mightn't just get from, say, your average course. And then, in terms of avenues to stay involved, I suppose these are maybe 3 of the most popular avenues. So coaching, which particularly for players seems to be either the avenue that they're sent down or the avenue that a lot of players tend to go down. So the Gaelic Games coaching pathway provides a framework for coaches to work at all level of our games. I know there was a question in relation to coaching already, so I'll pick that up in a minute. But that aligns to the overall Gaelic Games player pathway, which sits there for all players from F1 at nursery up to E1, which is inter-county level. And the coaching pathway then supports the player pathway within that. So the first step on the formal coach education pathway is the introduction to coaching Gaelic Games. And particularly for inter-county players, there's a brilliant opportunity that's generally available on an annual basis through Sport Ireland funding, which is an assimilation course, which basically allows inter-county players, I suppose, taking into account their previous experience of playing, that instead of doing the introduction to coaching Gaelic Games and then the level 1 course separately, it allows them to go straight to level 1. And that course is funded, so it's a brilliant opportunity for players. The officiating pathway then, and Aoife's already referred to Maggie Farley, who's a absolutely fantastic example, but this is for any potential referees or match officials. There's loads of different face-to-face and e-learning courses that are available. And we've seen a number of players that, or ex-players that have gone through that pathway as well and have used that as a way to stay involved. And then in terms of volunteering and administration, I suppose, at all levels, volunteers are essential. I was watching a video earlier and it was referring to, I think it was actually to do with the Learn to Lead program, that there's think however many members within the organization, and that is continually growing. And as a result of that, we need more and more people to be able to support that. So the administrator pathway, which is recently launched, provides a learning and development framework for volunteers at all levels in administrative roles, and will give you a bit of support and guidance on that area of things. And then I suppose beyond that, it's just really important to keep the connection. I think we've talked about it. You can obviously start journey into other facets of the sport before you finish playing. You might do it right away when you finish playing. You might never do it. You might come back in 2 years' time or 5 years' time. It's really important that you keep the connection and do what feels right for you and be involved when it feels right for you. But you can always keep that connection to your teammates. As I said, myself and Aoife probably haven't played together in the guts of 5 years, and yet whenever I picked up the phone to her and asked her to be a part of this, you're kind of very much taken back to that time where you're playing with each other. So I think you build a connection, you build a bond with people through playing sport, and it's really important that you can retain that at all levels. And particularly at club level, there's always opportunities to get involved. There's probably opportunities at county, provincial, national level, whether you want to get involved either on a consistent or a one-off basis as well. But definitely in the first instance, I would say get involved with your club, because all clubs across the country would absolutely love more volunteers. And I think, the reason for highlighting this conversation is that everyone's journey will be different in relation to particularly retirement or stepping away from playing. But other people will have experienced similar things. And, we've recently recorded a former players video series that will hopefully be released in the new year that will highlight some of that. And it didn't matter the players, the players that were involved were from all different counties across Ireland, but yet had experienced, whilst not experiencing the exact same things, had all experienced very similar themes and trends. So, um, yeah, it's important, as we would say, in whatever way you can keep that connection with the sport, we would absolutely encourage that. And I think at this stage, that is it for tonight's session. So what I will do is I will just pause the recording here.